Have you ever felt helpless while playing a board game? I know I felt like this quite a few times, especially when the odds are stacked against you, the dice don't roll in your favor, and you just cannot draw that very important card that will help you build your engine. This got me pondering about the idea of random chance and the luck of the draw and how it's incorporated into a lot of modern board games as a mechanic. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it something that will be a game changer to your overall feeling and experience of a game? And that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. How random does a game need to be? And are there ways to navigate and get around random chance? My name is Danny. I'm an avid modern board gamer from Australia who loves sharing my passion for this hobby with you, my friends, and my family. Come and join me for this journey.
Oh, hey Danny, what are you doing here in this very random board game shop? Yeah, this is a very random chance encounter that I never really expected. What are you doing here in this very random board game shop today? Well, I thought I'd browse the shelves of random board games and randomly pick one to take home to play. I admire you. That's a really bold thing to do. Well, it was nice meeting you. I hope that we randomly run into each other in the future and maybe have a random board game night together. What do you think? I don't know. I'm not really keen on playing with the random people that I meet in a random board game store, but I'm in.
Whenever I think of randomness in a board game, I often think of Monopoly, but then I also think of Catan. Now, often people talk about Catan being like the game to replace Monopoly, but I do have my own caveats when it comes to playing Catan itself. Yes, it's a much better game than Monopoly, but actually I've suffered many unfortunate losses in Catan, mainly due to a poor dice roll. And my main gripe with Catan is the fact that the resources that are generated are based on the roll of 2 dice. And so there are obviously certain numbers probability-wise that will come up more often than others, like 7, 6, and 8. Obviously, if you're rolling a 7, you're going to be able to move the robber and stop someone else from winning, but still, it all comes down to a sense of luck. And I remember playing several games of Catan where I thought I had the most highest probability resource tiles, yet those numbers never got rolled, or they got rolled once every 10 or 12 rolls. And so I was stuck in the game trying to trade with people, and people didn't want to trade with me because I didn't have enough resources that they needed to want to trade with me. So there was no real incentive for me to be invested in that game in the long term. And so Catan is probably a game where I sit on the fence on now, mainly because of that randomness that's involved. One way that games allows players to contend with this sense of randomness, a poor dice roll, or an unlucky card draw, is by giving players the power to mitigate the results, to be able to manipulate the outcome in some way so that the punishing effect of that poor result doesn't impact your overall gameplay. Glow is an atmospheric, dice-driven Eurogame where players are going to be exploring the shadows as they try and acquire different creature cards with different dice-altering abilities to try and garner the most victory points possible. What's really interesting about this unique game is the way it gives players different opportunities to manipulate the dice rolls. And I think it's really important in a game which is primarily dice-driven, where the elemental dice are like a resource in the game, that there's a lot of flexibility that's infused into the mechanics that allows players to try and get around some of these dice combos that you can get. One of the ways that the game provides you with some flexibility is to give players reroll tokens. You can store these reroll tokens, you can use them whenever you like to then reroll a result that you didn't really like. You can also go backwards on the victory point track. Yes, you can sacrifice victory points by going backwards to other reroll spots on the victory point track. So it's kind of like a penalty that you have to take to try and roll the dice to hopefully get what you want. And by losing those victory points, you can hopefully get the combo resources that you need. By using the creature powers, you can exchange and you can combo, you can reroll. There's a lot of different triggering effects as you build up your tableau or team of creatures. And finally, I love it when a game gives you that guaranteed outcome. And in Glow, you can trade 3 reroll tokens for a guaranteed outcome of your choice. So you can be like, ooh, I really need that leaf symbol. I'm gonna pay my 3 reroll tokens and guarantee that. Emerge is a Euro game where players take on the role of scientists as they discover a chain of undiscovered islands. They'll examine the wildlife, the plants that grow there, and hopefully conduct research to learn about where they came from. What's really cool about Emerge is it allows players to manipulate the dice results. Each player has a special board that has numbers from 1 to 6, which each correspond to a different action you can take throughout the game. It might be putting crabs on your island, or a seal, or growing an island so it becomes a lot larger. This game gives you ways to mitigate a poor dice roll so that you can kind of skewer the game to give you actions that you actually want to take. For example, at the beginning of the game, you can only use a number 2 die to add crabs to your island. But you can actually get discovery tiles that can be placed over some of the other die results so that you can increase the chances of using dice for that particular action. So it might be covering the 5 tile so that now you can use a numbered 5 die or a number 2 die to add crabs to your island. Increasing and covering up those outcomes means that you can manipulate the dice that you've already saved on previous rounds, as well as use them for the particular actions that you want. It's really interesting about using outcome-based randomness is that a lot of the outcomes are predetermined by the players themselves. So in a game like Marrakesh, where players at the beginning of the round have to choose 3 out of the 12 keshis from behind their screen, and then those are the 3 different action spaces they'll activate on their board. And in Marrakesh, there's actually 12 different things that you can do, 12 regions on your playboard that you can kind of dabble with. Then the players place their workers on those 3 regions to announce to the other players, these are the 3 areas that I'm gonna trigger this round. So it could be the river, it could be the pink area, or it could be the orange area, whatever. And then all players will place those keshis in a tower. And because in Marrakesh, the tower itself kind of has this kind of sieve through it, some of the keshis are going to fall through to the bottom and some are going to get captured in the tower itself. And the ones that fall through the bottom are going to be the ones that get placed out onto players' boards. So after the keshis are in the tower and the keshis are kind of sorted at the bottom base of the tower, players are going to be drafting up to 2 of the same keshi color at a time and placing it in their player area. That's going to increase the magnitude and the power of those colored regions on their player board. And the randomness here comes through which of those keshis are going to get stuck in the tower. You might think, oh, I'm the only player that has put a pink keshi in the tower and no other player has. I really need that pink keshi because I'm going to trigger that pink action this time. But if that pink keshi gets stuck in the tower, you're left with an underpowered action. And another color might all of a sudden become more plentiful. The green one might become more plentiful, and then that kind of shifts your game strategy. Castles of Burgundy is probably one of my favorite Euro games of all time. And when I think of dice and random dice rolls and how to manipulate the results, I always think of this game because everything in this game hinges on your 2 dice. They basically influence where you can place hex tiles on your map. They tell you what depot you can take tiles from. They also influence like what type of goods you can sell at the market. And I always like to think that the worker resource that you use in this game, which kind of allows you to increase and decrease your dice pips by 1, is a really valuable commodity because by saving them up, if there is an essential spot that helps you to complete, a yellow region or a green region, you can use those worker resources to get the value that you want and guarantee that you'll fill that in. The game Dice Forge is an interesting game because the game is all about crafting the ultimate die. Being able to change the faces of your dice so that when you roll them, you can get particular results or increase your chance of getting a particular result is pretty innovative. And the idea of this game is to be able to select the outcomes that you want, stick them on your die, upgrade them so that the abilities and the power effects become more and more powerful. It just is an innovative way to control the randomness of your dice rolls, which I think is really cool. The next aspect of randomness I want to touch upon is outcomes based, where basically players can almost somewhat predict the outcome of a dice roll or even a card play or a card draw, and that can kind of contribute to the strategy and decision making that they make throughout the game. The first game example I want to talk about is Sleeping Gods. I really like Sleeping Gods because it's such a rich, thematic, unique experience, but I want to draw your attention to the fate cards and how they're used in combat. Basically, when players are versing a creature, they'll draw a fate card from the fate deck, and the fate deck will have certain numbers written in the top corner, which they use to add to a player's accuracy, and that'll determine whether players strike a beast or not. And what's really cool about this is that rather than using a d6 die, which gives players a 1 in 6 chance of rolling one of the 6 numbers, Fate deck itself has already got a pre-constructed distribution of numbers already littered throughout the deck. So that means that there might be a 6 out of 36 chance of getting a 1, but once you've drawn 6 cards with 1 on them, you know that there's probably going to be no more 1s left in the Fate deck until you reach the bottom. There might be, 6 5s, and so that way, whilst the chance of getting a 1 at the beginning seems equalized, as you churn through the deck, you can almost somewhat predict what numbers might come up next. And if you're thinking, wow, we've had such a really tough combat for the last, hour or so, we haven't seen any 6s, you know that as you get closer to the bottom of the deck, a 6 is going to appear. So this brings me to one of my favorite family games of all time that really allows players to tinker with randomness, and in particular bag building actually. It's a game called Quacks of Quedlinburg. Basically, you're going to be building bags with different ingredients and creating potions as you try and move around your spiral pot track. Now, what's really cool about Quacks of Quedlinburg is that it's got this really interesting push your luck mechanism where if you draw out of the bag a total value of 7 or more white ingredients, your pot goes bust and that kind of ends your turn and you take a little bit of a penalty. There is a randomness to the sort of tokens you'll draw from your bag. But what is really crucial here is getting that value of 7. If you draw 2 white 1 ingredients, you think, I'm actually pretty safe. I can keep drawing without the fear of actually going bust. But as soon as you hit 5 or 6, you're thinking, could I go 1 more? Could I go 1 more than that? And if I go 1 more than that, I might be able to get some extra points. Other colored ingredients give you all these different scoring opportunities, different abilities that help you to, make things cheaper, more accessible, allow you to manipulate the randomness a little bit more. All players know what is in their bag. They know at the beginning of the game there's going to be a high chance of getting a white, but as you get further throughout the game, that becomes less and less and less. And then players are more weighing up the options of, I could get a red, I could get a green. Being able to know the outcomes and somewhat predict the outcomes of what you draw from your bag of ingredients means that players have a little bit more empowerment. There are some board games out there where if a player rolls poorly, the game says, sorry, that's the end of your turn, pass the dice on to the next player, it's their turn. Better luck next time. And I'm not really a fan of games that do that, where it just feels like you're just left out, as if you've been abandoned in space and the other people on your crew don't really care about you. So the next game I really want to talk about is one where if you roll a low value, you actually get a cool bonus that kind of evens the game out. The game I'm talking about is Unearth. In Unearth, you're basically trying to claim these cool ruin cards and create sets of ruins based on the color, and basically you're using the pip value of the dice to try and complete those ruin cards by meeting a threshold. Now, to do that, you're going to be rolling 4, 5s, and 6s, just because you only have to commit 1 die and you'll be able to access that card a little bit more easily and dominate across the other players. But if you roll a 1, 2, or 3, that's not really going to help you acquire that card. So in this game, rolling a 1, 2, or 3 gives you the ability to pull a block card, kind of like a Minecraft block card or a gemstone card, from a bag and then use them to create these cool little 3D rings where you then can build little wonders inside and score extra points at the end of the game. So I love how this is a split puzzle where you've got one area control mechanism where you can use your dice to control a particular ruin, but on the other hand, you're using your smaller valued dice to create these cool little patterns and score in other ways. randomness can create an interesting ever-evolving puzzle when the randomness actually creates a fluctuation or a limitation of resources that players can use each and every round or throughout a game. One of the games that comes to mind when it comes to using randomness as a way of constricting or expanding players' strategy is a game called Grand Austria Hotel. In Grand Austria Hotel, you're going to be rolling dice as a group, and then the dice are going to be sorted based on their number. And then what's going to happen here is that players are going to be able to draft dice from the 6 columns, and then depending on which column they choose from will influence what action they can take. But the twist here is that if a column has a lot of dice in it, that's the magnitude or power of that action that you can take. So for example, if it might be like the 2 and you need like a strudel and there are 4 dice in that column with the number 2 on it, you'll be able to take 4 of that resource. In addition to that, column 6 is kind of like a wild column. Yes, you'll have to sacrifice a die, but using the wild column allows you to reuse one of the other 5 action columns. So if someone else has already emptied, the number 1 column, you can now use the dice in the 6th column to do the number 1 column action. In Roll for the Galaxy, players are going to be rolling their dice behind their screens, and some of the dice faces actually have like a wild symbol which allows you to allocate them to any of the 5 different actions. When players roll their dice, players are going to pick one of their dice to place it on one of the 5 actions behind the screen that they actually want to be resolved, and this is guaranteed to actually give them that action for this particular round. All the other 4 actions, the chances of getting those actions could be up to what the other players at the table are going to choose. So Roll for the Galaxy creates this cool dynamic of going, ooh, which of these 5 actions do I really want to complete, and which of the other 4 actions do I hope to complete? Because the dice rolls that you get from the rest of your dice pool have to get allocated under the 5 different actions. And so you could have 3 shipping dice and then 1 explore dice. And so by allocating them into different spaces and then choosing which of those 5 actions you definitely want to initiate means the choice of which dice results you're using and how you're using them becomes more impactful on the strategy and the pathway and journey you take throughout the game, and some of the synergies that you can explore using the tiles in the game. And then you've got fantastic Euros like Toledo, where the dice rolls are going to influence the number of resources that you take as well as the number of action points you have to spend on your turn in the game. And this creates for a really interesting binary decision that players have to make. The number on the top of the die that you take and also the color determines what type of resource you're going to get. So you might pick that pink 6 and get 6 of those pink resources into your supply. But then on the other side of the die, the one on the opposite end, because we know the opposite ends of a d6 die always add up to 7, the fact that there's a 1 on the bottom of the die means that you're going to only have 1 action point to spend on your round. So the big weighted decision or the moral dilemma here is, do I take a lot of resources because I need them and then only spend 1 action point on that particular action? Or do I do the opposite? Pick a die that has a 1 on it, get 1 of that resource, but then be able to spend 6 action points on that particular dice space. And that is such a cool, innovative design element. Then there is the beloved Rajas of the Ganges, which basically uses dice and different colors to allow players to acquire different tiles that players can kind of help to build paths in their palace grounds. Now, rolling a low die value in Rajas of the Ganges is going to help you advance up the river track. And the river track is literally littered with some beautiful bonuses that are going to help get your game moving. And so it almost acts as like a catch-up mechanism. Rolling a 1 or 2 means that you're still going to get something on your turn. Rolling a 1 or 2 means that you can probably get a cool market tile that's going to give you 2 fame points and an extra die. So I really like games that help to balance the game out so that no matter what you roll, you're going to get a benefit. No matter what you roll, you're going to be able to be pushed along a way where the strategy is still going to help you catch up to the person who's in the lead and close that gap. I love games that acknowledge the randomness, they embrace the randomness, and they think about how can we use this randomness in an interesting manner that's going to make for a fun game. So what do you think about random chance in board games? Is it something that you try to tactfully avoid, or do you like it when games give you ways to mitigate a really poor dice roll? Now, if you found this video super helpful, please consider liking and subscribing to my channel. If you want to have a little bit more say about the direction where this channel goes, please head over to my Patreon page and support me over there. I would really well and truly appreciate it. Otherwise, this is Danny signing out. Please check out some of the other hundreds of videos on my main YouTube page, and I look forward to bringing you another Board Game Sanctuary video soon. Cheers!